The road is a place filled with mysteries, where the unexpected lurks in the shadows, and the unknown reveals itself when you least expect. Truck drivers know this feeling all too well. They live on the edge of day and night, witnessing things most of us would never believe. But what happens when these experiences stop being just stories and become reality? Get ready to hear accounts that will send chills down your spine, because sometimes the danger isn't around the next bend, but in the things you can't see. Story 1. The Shadow on the Deserted Road. It was a moonless night, kind of darkness that swallows everything around. Marcos, an experienced truck driver, was halfway through a long journey, cutting through the emptiness of a deserted road in the countryside. He always enjoyed driving at night, where the silence and solitude made him feel at peace. But that night, something was different. The radio emitted only static, an annoying companion, but he was used to it. Then he noticed something in the rearview mirror. A shadow, strange and distorted, seemed to be following the truck. He blinked, thinking it was just fatigue, but the shadow was there, taking shape. Marcos's heart began to race, and he felt a chill run down his spine. Trying to calm himself, he sped up, believing it was just an illusion. The shadow was still there, growing more distinct, as if it were chasing him. With no lights on the road, the only visible thing was that presence, dancing in the dimness behind him. Marcos decided he needed to stop. Maybe a coffee would help shake off that strange feeling. He spotted an abandoned gas station, one of those you find in the middle of nowhere, falling apart. Parked, turned off the engine, and looked back. The shadow had disappeared. Taking a deep breath, he stepped out of the cab, trying to shake off the fear. But as he walked toward the closed store, he felt something strange. Present. The station was dead, with no sign of life, but he felt he was not alone. Then he heard footsteps behind him, heavy steps echoing in the darkness. Marcos quickly turned, but there was no one there. Just the truck, parked in the distance. He started to run, but with each step the sounds grew closer, louder. When he finally reached the cab and got in, the doors slammed shut on their own, as if something had locked him inside. He started the engine with trembling hands and drove off, leaving the station and the strange presence behind. The fear didn't fade. Even miles away, he knew the shadow was still there. Now, not just a distant silhouette, something much darker, something he would never be able to escape. Because sometimes, what chases you on the road isn't what you see, but what hides in the darkness, waiting for the right moment to reveal itself. Story 2. The Voice on the Radio That Should Never Be Heard. Rogerio was a seasoned truck driver, accustomed to spending entire nights behind the wheel, crossing lonely highways while most of the world slept. On that early morning, he was driving through a mountainous road, surrounded by cliffs and sharp curves. The slightest mistake meant the end. The truck's radio, which usually picked up only old songs and local news, started to fail. The static took over, but Rogerio didn't mind. This was common in remote areas. Then, amidst the noise, a voice emerged. It wasn't music nor an advertisement. It was a cold voice, almost a whisper, calling for him. Rogerio. The trucker widened his eyes and frowned. Maybe it was some interactive radio show, someone playing a prank on the listeners. He laughed nervously and tried to tune to another station, but the voice continued. Rogerio, you shouldn't be here. Rogerio's blood ran cold. How did someone know his name? He looked at the radio as if it could offer an answer, but all he saw was the needle moving on its own, as if the static was being manipulated by something or someone. Rogerio, get off this road, before it's too late. Sweat dripped down his forehead. His hands trembled on the wheel. He knew something was very wrong, but continuing the journey seemed like the only option. Then the voice changed, becoming more urgent, almost desperate. Stop now. Before he could react, something jumped in front of the truck. Rogerio slammed on the brakes. The sound of the tires screeching echoed through the mountains, but it was too late. He felt the impact, and the truck shook violently before coming to a halt. Breathing heavily, he looked ahead, trying to understand what had happened. There was nothing on the road, just the thick fog and the darkness that enveloped everything. The radio returned to its normal static, as if nothing had happened, but he knew that voice had saved his life. He got out of the truck, still dazed, and saw that he was on the edge of a cliff. One more step and he would have fallen, destroying not only the vehicle but himself. But why? Why had that voice warned him? Who or what was on the other side of the radio that night? As Rogerio returned to the cab, a terrifying thought crossed his mind. Perhaps not all voices on the radio are human, and some of them, even if they save your life, may be closer than you think. Story 3. Phantom Passenger on the Endless Night. Carlos was always a man of few words, but many miles traveled. He loved long journeys, especially those that took him through less traveled roads, where the only company was the constant hum of the engine and the endless stretch of asphalt ahead. It was on one of those nights that he encountered something he would never forget. The clock on the dashboard read just past 3 in the morning, that time when the world seemed suspended between dream and reality. Fatigue was starting to weigh on him. Carlos knew he couldn't stop. There were still many miles to go before his destination. Then he saw a figure on the side of the road. A solitary figure with an arm extended in a hitchhiking gesture. Carlos hesitated. It wasn't common to see someone so late on that stretch of road, especially on such a cold night. Something inside him, perhaps fatigue or empathy for someone lost in that darkness, made him stop the truck. The figure was a man, pale in appearance, dressed in simple, almost old-fashioned clothes. The man got into the cab without saying a word, merely nodding in thanks. Carlos tried to make conversation, asking where he was headed, but the passenger just looked ahead, silently, his eyes fixed on the road. As the miles passed, the silence in the cab became oppressive. The stranger didn't move a muscle, didn't make a sound. Carlos felt a growing unease, a sense that something wasn't right. He decided to turn on the radio, trying to break that tense atmosphere, but the radio only buzzed with an annoying static, as if the presence of that man was interfering with the signals. After what seemed like hours, the stranger finally broke the silence. In a weak and distant voice, he said, "The road continues, but I stop here." Carlos, not understanding, looked to the side and saw that the man was pointing to a dark spot on the road, where there was nothing but a small entrance to what appeared to be an abandoned cemetery. Carlos stopped the truck, confused and chilled. The man opened the door and got out, walking toward the cemetery. Carlos watched him for a moment, but in the blink of an eye, the man vanished, as if he had been swallowed by the darkness. Shocked, Carlos got out of the truck and went to the spot where the stranger had disappeared. All he found was an old tombstone, worn by time, with a name almost erased and a date of death very long ago. He felt a chill run through his body when he realized that the date on the tombstone was exactly the same as that night. With his heart racing, Carlos ran back to the truck and drove away as fast as he could. The road ahead seemed endless, but he knew he would never forget the passenger who should never have existed. And now, every time he drives down a deserted road, Carlos wonders if, somewhere in the darkness, that man is still waiting for a ride to the place he never should have left. They were just ordinary truck drivers, traveling down lonely roads. On those roads, something inexplicable found them. Something they could never have predicted or controlled, turning their lives into a true nightmare. And now, their stories continue to echo in the darkness. Would you dare drive these roads? If these stories gave you chills, and you can't wait to hear more terrifying tales that will make your heart race, then you're in the right place. Here, the shadows of the night come to life, and lonely roads hide dark secrets that few dare to explore. Subscribe now and join our community of horror lovers. Because fear can be terrifying, but nothing is scarier than missing out on the next story that might keep you up at night. Stay with us. If you dare.